Forget culture. The Pelicans need wins, not warm, fuzzy feelings. Plus, we'll look at the biggest remaining questions for the season. It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday. We are a day away from Media Day. It is Tuesday. We will preview Media Day in tomorrow's show. But today I want to ask you this question. Is culture overrated? I think it might be. Do you want a nice locker room or do you want the Pelicans to win games? We're going to break down the culture versus wins debate in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Then I want to look at the biggest questions remaining. Is everyone healthy? What happens to the final roster spot? How hot is Willie Green's seat? And maybe the biggest one of all, what timeline are the Pelicans going to pick? We got it all in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everyday. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So quick note, the show was pre-recorded because I'm traveling today. We'll be back tomorrow and I'm here the rest of the week. Joe Dumars is speaking today. I unfortunately won't be there. I will watch it, and we're going to break it down in tomorrow's show. Tuesday's show, and we'll also preview Media Day. Wednesday will be a Media Day recap. The rest of the week will be kind of Media Day stuff and storylines. So it's a lot to cover. I've got interviews lined up. It's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it all. So I'm going to pose this question to you. Is culture overrated when it comes to NBA teams? And I think it might be. We have focused the past couple shows on some of the things Joe Dumars said at the Greater New Orleans Quarterback Club meeting, in particular around Zion Williamson and the depth conversation and we don't trust Zion Williamson to be healthy, even if he didn't directly say that. But Joe Dumars also put an emphasis on culture and the environment in the building. And that was, he said, his #1 priority when he came to this organization. He's poured, he said, a ton of effort into things like accountability, creating a winning environment, a winning mentality, and just the overall culture here. And I'm here to say this. I think culture is overrated. I think culture is overrated in the NBA. People talk a lot about building a culture and all of this. And truthfully, what does that even mean, right? Is culture how you go about doing things? Is it your mentality or is it something else? And I think it's one of those things that's tough to quantify, right? And, when you think of culture in the NBA, you think of the Miami Heat and something termed heat culture. And it's kind of the way they do things, the way they approach things, right? The mentality, kind of all that stuff we just said. And what has it gotten them? Truthfully, what has it gotten them? Look, they're a good team, but they're not winning multiple NBA titles behind heat culture anymore. Last year, they were 37-45 and were the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference. What did heat culture get you? A sweep in the first round. The year before that, they went 46-36, 8th in the Eastern Conference. Play-in tournament team, lost in 5 games in the first round. The year before that, they were better, 44-38, but they were 7th in the Eastern Conference. Now, they made it all the way to the NBA Finals. Was that Jimmy Butler or was that heat culture, right? I'd say it's Jimmy Butler. The year before that one, that was the year they were actually very good, 53-29. We got no complaints here. Year before that, 40-32, finished 6th in the Eastern Conference, got swept in the first round. They've had Jimmy Butler, who's a tremendous player, but you would not call Jimmy Butler a culture guy whatsoever. Frankly, he's the opposite of a culture guy. Yet they had him in there, and they made it to the Eastern Conference final, or the finals twice behind him. Now that he's gone, they don't really seem like they're going to be doing that anymore. So what does that heat culture actually get you? Maybe it combated Jimmy Butler, and some of the negative stuff that he brought to the team, or is he just that good that he elevates you? When I hear things like, oh, let's build a culture, I always worry about that because Culture is great. It doesn't matter if you don't win games, if you're not competitive, if you're not a title contender. I don't care if you're all happy and love each other and, we come in, we're going to win every game, but you actually lose all the time, right? He had talked a lot about trying to change the mentality of this team, kind of really working on that. And again, it's not bad, right? He basically said you can't win against other teams unless you think you're supposed to win. Like, sure, I buy that. But I don't think that means you're actually going to win. I can think I'm going to come in and do the best podcast ever every single day. And look, I think I do a good job, but I know, there's days when certain shows are worse than the other. And it's just the reality of it. Someone else might be like, I'm going to be the best podcaster ever. And it turns out they're not, just because they think it doesn't make it true. You need more than that to win at the NBA. Or in the NBA. So when people talk about culture, I always kind of am just yeah, if you can have a great one, that's good. Don't get me wrong, but I'd rather just have talent that's going to go and win. I don't care if they're friends outside of there. I don't care about that kind of stuff. Let everyone just be happy where they are, do their thing, do your job, be a professional. It doesn't need to be much more than that necessarily. When you hear and look at some of these big teams, you've never heard anything about the Milwaukee Bucks culture. You haven't heard anything about the Denver Nuggets culture. In fact, the Denver Nuggets probably had a bad culture given they fired Michael Malone, their title-winning head coach. So I do think culture can be very overrated in the NBA. Look, it's a results-oriented business. At the end of the day, it's wins, it's losses. It's not whether you have a good culture or not. You heard Griff say a lot of the same things that Joe Dumars is saying, and people hated that because they weren't delivering on the results. Had they been winning, no one would have had a problem with what Joe Dumars or with what David Griffin was saying. It really comes down to deliver, win, do your job, right? That's what it is here. And if you're not doing that, then it's not going to matter what culture you build. A lot of these front office people, want to be like, we're a great executive. I want to build something. They don't necessarily want to win games. They don't necessarily want to win an NBA title. I mean, they certainly want to do that, but they want to build something, right? I kind of think of it in the height of cars and that and Detroit and all of that, Lee Iacocca and all those people kind of building an organization and the way we do things here. And that's kind of what, they stake their claim on. Not that they sold a ton of cars. It's the organization that they built instead. But for publicly traded companies, it's sell a bunch of cars. Otherwise, we don't care. And that's when people get pushed out, no matter how great of leaders they potentially are. You have to deliver results. So all of this from Joe Dumars, sure, pour into the culture, create an environment of accountability and all of that. But it's not going to matter if you don't win. And if you prioritize culture over those other things that are going to get you wins, you're not going to win and you're going to lose. And then you're going to get fired. And it's as simple as that. And we won't have what you want to show from it here. And that's not to say that Joe Dumars is focusing on those things over the others. Not to say that David Griffin was either, but it comes to more than just culture. Build a competent team. Show what it takes to win in the NBA in 2025, 2026, because that's the most important thing. I don't care if everyone likes each other. Win games. That's what you have to do. I speak a lot about process over results, but I've gotten a little bit away from that over the past couple of years when it comes to the NBA, because you just got to win. I don't care how you do it. Just do it. Doesn't matter to me as much. Just figure it out and get it done. You, the fan, don't care about process over results. You want to see the team win. It's as simple as that. I don't care much about the culture here. I want to hear how they're going to win and then go and show me how you do it. I think culture in the NBA is a little bit overrated. It's not saying you should get rid of it entirely or you shouldn't focus on it, but don't prioritize that at the expense of other things. When you do that, cool, you're building a nice organization that's going to be in the lottery every single year. I don't want that. I want to see this team win. Coming up next, let's shift gears. I wanted to rant about that a little bit today because I found that one kind of interesting. Let's look at the biggest remaining questions for the Pelicans, before the start of the season. I've got 4 here, and you might have others too. Put yours in the comments down below on YouTube. Coming up next, health and the final roster spot. Let's look at those 2 things. It's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because it fits however you want to bet. Player props, spreads, same-game parlays with the player props and the spreads for a bigger payout. You can also just get in on the live action. You're watching a game, you want to make it a little bit more interesting. The lines are always being updated. So it just makes every game more exciting. Whether you're watching your favorite team, just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little bit more juice to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, that's $300. That's maybe the best offer I've ever heard from FanDuel in bonus bets in the FanDuel app, which you can get at FanDuel.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen, it's Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson making sense of everything black and gold, covering the QB stuff to what needs to change. Can they clean up the penalties, please? Ross Jackson, make Locked On Saints your second listen today, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's switch gears and look at the remaining, to me, the biggest remaining questions for the Pelicans. And it starts with this. Is everyone healthy? Is everybody healthy? That's my number one question. That's my number one question. At Media Day on Tuesday, I'm going to ask everybody that was injured, are you healthy now? How are you feeling? How did the offseason go? Because we can talk about culture. We can talk about Jordan Poole. We can talk about literally anything with this team. Jeremiah Fears, Derek Queen. If the team's as injured as they were in years past or as injured as they've been in past years, none of it is going to matter. None of it is going to matter if they're injured again like they've been. The biggest question is, are you healthy now? Because at least you can go into the season with a clean bill of health and be ready to try and evaluate this team. Herb Jones played 20 games, had shoulder surgery. Trey Murphy also had shoulder surgery. Are they fully ready to go? Derek Queen with the hand injury in Summer League, is he ready to go? DeJounte Murray, when is he going to be ready to go? How is the recovery going? Zion Williamson was banged up throughout the season. They kind of shut him down early. That was more of a tanking thing. Is he going to be ready to go? And what if this is a player that's been dealing with a lot of injuries, if I get the chance to have a one-on-one with Zion, one of the questions I'm going to ask is, have you done things differently this offseason from years past? And Joe Dumars actually spoke about this at the Quarterback Club event, and I think this one's good, and I like this here. One of the things he asked players and coaches was, do you know what the definition of insanity is? Basically to say, we can't keep doing things the way that we've been doing them or that y'all have been doing them and expect different results. It's, for Zion Williamson, it's going into year 7. Is this going to be the year it gets figured out or not? You've been injured. We went over the injuries last year. And, his 6 seasons in the NBA, 4 of them, he's played 30 or fewer games. That's not good, right? Even if he's playing 50 games every year, we'd feel better about this. But it's not even getting to that necessarily. And again, he could have played a few more games last year too. That number could have been closer to the 50s. But that's not 70 games every year, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is playing. You need to be available, because if you're not, the team's going to lose here. So what are they doing differently to do all this? I'm unfortunately not going to be at the Joe Dumars media availability, but one of the things I would want to know is, have you made other changes behind the scenes? If you say you want to do things differently, are you shaking up the organization as a whole too? And, he's done some of that with the front office. Troy Weaver coming in for better or worse. Bryson Graham leaving for better or worse. There have been some changes. But are there more changes that we don't know about to the player performance and care team, to the medical staff team? It was changed up a couple of years ago, and they had a good season. And then they didn't have a good, healthy season last year. So did you make changes there? What's going to be different this year to ensure that you don't have the injury luck that you had last season? This applies to Joe Dumars as well. What's being changed there? Look, I even like the idea of like change for change's sake at this point in time. Just gotta do something differently, right? I don't want to scapegoat anybody. I don't even want to advocate for people losing their jobs. I think that's awful. It's the unfortunate part of this business. But at a certain point, you got to just do something. So did they do that? That's a big question that I have. Did you make other changes that haven't been reported on yet that's going to help you avoid the same results that you've had before? Those are things I truthfully want to know about because, yeah, they got to make some changes there, don't they? Because that has not gone the direction that they want whatsoever. So things need to change in that regard. And if it leads to people being healthy, number one thing, are you going to be healthy to start the year? Are you going to be healthy throughout the year? My second kind of open-ended question right now, I'm not ranking this one as like the second most, but it's, what are they going to do with the final roster spot? There's a couple of guys that they've signed to training camp deals, Jaden Springers and others, to try and kind of compete for that final roster spot. But they're signing them to camp deals, right? Jalen McDaniels, Jaden Springer. I think there was another name in there as well that I'm completely blanking on here in the moment with it. So are those guys going to be the guys that make the team, or are you going to just kind of bring them in for training camp to compete a little bit and just provide a little bit more oomph, a little bit more juice here, if you will? And truthfully, I think the idea is, they would say, if asked this question, like, oh no, we're going to give them the opportunity to compete, which by the way is smart. Bring those guys in. Those guys want to be on NBA rosters. Bring them into training camp where they think they have a realistic chance, even if they don't actually do that. Because in training camp practices, in preseason games, in all of that, they are going to compete harder than other people because they have more on the line than others do. In those practices, it's going to push your other guys. I love that plan, that strategy, that approach to it. More competition in all of that to, iron sharpens iron kind of idea here. I do think they're going to end up going into the season with that roster spot open or with someone on an unguaranteed deal that they can waive later. That's probably the smartest thing. They don't really need one of those guys unless, Joe Dumars thinks it can provide the depth that he is looking for. But I'm curious what they feel the plans are here. If you sign somebody to that spot, especially this late, you're not going to have the easiest time trading them and maybe not able to move them in a deal. And if you're looking to upgrade the roster and kind of preserve some flexibility for whatever direction you go in, more on that in the next segment here, you want to have the flexibility, particularly for a team that's going to be kind of flirting with the luxury tax line. You don't want to have to just waive somebody and eat their salary, which that could be the difference between a trade happening or not, because it would put you in the luxury tax. So it would make more sense for the team to keep payroll lower and keep that final roster spot open. So coming up next, how hot is Willie Green's seat? And what direction are the Pelicans going to go in? Those are kind of the two of the bigger questions. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with zero sugar and zero crashes. I love how portable these are. I pre-recorded this because it's my bachelor party this weekend. It's going to be a long weekend. We're drinking a lot of 5-Hour Energy just to keep ourselves going. I love the grape. I love the transfusion flavor as well. You just keep one in your pocket. You're kind of a little bit tired. You got big taste in a tiny shot that you can take anywhere and get that boost when you need it. When I play golf, I grab one in the morning before going to my car because I don't want to take the time to make coffee at the office. It's good to keep a couple around just in case you need them. So enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new. You can get them in-store and online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every weekday at 10:30 a.m. Now on DirecTV as well. For your second listen, go make it Locked On NBA. It's going to kind of, the Pelicans have one of the early media days, but all the media days are going to be coming soon. So it's pretty exciting, I think, to kind of catch up around the league. The storylines are starting to come together. Locked On NBA, covering the biggest stories every single day. Make Locked On NBA your second listen today. So let's look at two more of the biggest questions for me. If you've got other questions that I haven't put out here, let me know in the comments down below. One of the biggest ones I have is, how hot is Willie Green's seat as head coach? It's pretty hot, in my opinion, here. This is a critical year for New Orleans. It's going to tie into the next question that I'm going to pose to you as well. They're trying to be competitive, but they might not be. And if they're not going to be, but they still want to be, you got to do something quick. And the quickest thing you can do is fire your head coach and elevate an interim head coach in there and see if that does the trick, right? It's easier than just completely turning over the roster, particularly in, say, December or January, when most trades won't get done until the week of the NBA's trade deadline. So this is a good way to just kind of make a determination on Willie Green. It's working or it's not, and you've got to pull the plug. This is especially helpful if the team is actually healthy going into the season, because then, look, there's no excuses. Willie Green has been dealt a bad hand with all of the injuries that he has had. So many. I don't know if anyone would have been able to coach this team to more wins necessarily. Sometimes, yes. And Willie Green has his faults too. But this is going to be kind of his first opportunity to be like, here you go. Here's your full roster. Is it good or not? Make the most with it to start the year. Can't start off slow, because if we do, we don't have a pick next year. We got to make the playoffs. So we're going to make a change. The NBA Cup, I think, is going to be pretty critical for New Orleans in all of this. They're in a tough group with the Los Angeles Lakers, Los Angeles Clippers, Memphis Grizzlies, and Dallas Mavericks. Those are all competitive teams. All competitive teams here. And not elite teams either. They're just B-plus teams. You've got to win some of those games. You've got to maybe get out of the NBA Cup or at least the group stages and make it to the knockout rounds. If you don't, that's kind of indicative that this team just isn't up to snuff where they are right now. And that might mean they make a change at head coach. Because they want to be competitive first, and we'll talk about the two timelines thing in a second here. Their first thing they're trying to make work is, let's be competitive. That's the tier A, right? Priority one of what they're trying to do. So if you're not being competitive and they want to remain competitive, you're going to need your head coach there's going to need to be a change there. You also don't want to go into the season with the head coach, on an expiring contract. You see soccer teams do this more so than the NBA, but it's coaches on an expiring deal. They're winning. Let's actually fire him because he's going to cost us too much should we do well. If Willie Green makes the postseason with this team in any capacity, he's going to get an extension here, and he's going to have more leverage, because otherwise the Pelicans are letting a playoff head coach just walk away, and that's going to look terrible for them. Can't do that. So he's going to get more money than he would otherwise. Willie Green would have all the leverage at that point in time. Pelicans don't want that. So it means they might need to make a change sooner rather than later. So, and then if it's okay, well, the season's just not going the way that we want, there's no point in keeping a lame duck head coach at that point in time. They believe in James Borrego, and if they do, give him a chance to prove it. They screwed this up with Chris Finch when in the bubble season they wanted to fire Alvin Gentry, didn't fire Alvin Gentry, could have elevated Chris Finch to being the interim head coach and given him kind of that trial run. And lo and behold, look, they didn't do that. He left. He's a good head coach now. You missed the mark on that. Don't repeat that same mistake. For my final biggest question is, which timeline do the Pelicans end up going with? The win now timeline or the development timeline? You will need to pick one or the other around the trade deadline. At the trade deadline, you pick win now and you trade for win now players and sacrifice a little bit of the future, not too much, to try and win now and make a bigger postseason run or just make the postseason. Or if you realize it's not going well, do you move on from Zion? Is there some sort of fire sale here, or do you just start playing heavy minutes to Jeremiah Fears, Derek Queen, Micah Peavy and others? That, and try and acquire a couple of future first-round picks or future draft capital to help you figure out what direction you want to go in at that point in time. You can't thread the needle between both of these things. They are kind of not exactly mutually exclusive, but not that either. So you need to figure this out. And I hope the Pelicans end up kind of choosing the right timeline sooner rather than later. That is one of the things that you want. You want to see them choose one and go all in on that rather than, basically half-assing the rest, each one and trying to kind of get the best of both worlds. It doesn't quite work at the NBA level. So, the Pelicans that will get figured out by the trade deadline. It would be better to learn that sooner rather than later. They're likely going to go through an approach of, okay, we want to be competitive. We're not being competitive. Let's fire Willie Green. Here's James Borrego or whoever they put in that role. Okay, we're not being competitive either here. It means now we're going to pivot, right? You're going to have to go through some steps to get to the right timeline that you want, but they can figure that out. And they will need to pick a path to go down because it could happen, but it's very unlikely that you'd be able to do both those successfully. What are your biggest questions? What do you want to hear asked at Media Day? Let me know in the comments down below. We will preview that in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. We'll recap what Joe Dumars says in his media availability, which is on Monday as well. And as always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be back with y'all tomorrow. Season's basically here. I'm excited. I hope you're excited too. See y'all next time.